talk a little bit about your current rig, preferred strings, picks, tuning. Um, I've posted an hour and a half worth of video covering the instruments and
Yeah.
and strings and stuff, so you can gloss over that if you want. But
Sure.
let's talk about your the signal chain
Sure.
off the bass.
Sure. Okay. So I'm coming from the bass, and I'll do it real quick just
Yeah.
as a review. But like I use Spectre basses. They're my signature model, 5-string, made in Czech Republic. So like a modification of the Euro LX. From Spectre, I use signature Seymour Duncan pickups. I like dark glass preamps, the tone capsule preamps. Use DR strings, the high beams, 125 to 45, and any additional information anyone wants about basses or anything I'm forgetting right now. There's 4 videos that you made that will help them out, and they can find them on this channel. But once the signal leaves the bass, it goes into when we're talking about live. In the studio, all bets are off. We will mess around and figure out whatever we can to suit the guitar tone. So I won't go too far off on that, but basically we get our guitar sound first in Cannibal and get all that recorded first, and then I find a bass sound that works well with that, and we go from there. But pretty much every album we've done, I think the rhythm guitar was recorded before the bass. We consider that one of the most critical things, for an album a metal album to sound great, is to have this amazing rhythm guitar sound. So then the bass is kind of built to support that. So yeah, we'll figure it out. They can be different each time. It really has been a little bit different every time, whereas my live rig has been kind of the same for a few years now, and I'll go into that. I go into the first stop is a radial bass bone. It's part of their Tone Bone series. And I use either a bass bone OD. Right now I'm getting that one fixed because it got a little banged up on some of those flights that we just took. I believe we're thinking it might be that, or it could have just been something that maybe the switch broke. We're not sure what happened, but somewhere along the way it doesn't switch between channels anymore. So I'm getting that fixed. I'm going to use one of my older radial bass bones, and they're really nice channel switching device. It also has a DI out, a tuner out, a mute. It's kind of like a little bass control center, and it works really well if you have basses that have different level outputs, because you have 2 channels. So if you switch from channel 1, where you might have a passive bass that's kind of quiet, and switch to channel 2 for a hot active bass, you can have them dialed in so that you're not blowing up the board and the PA system, you know what I mean, with some drastic level change. You can have that all ironed out beforehand, and it should switch pretty seamlessly for you. So I've been using that for quite a while, because between the 2 different tunings, and for a while I was using a couple different kind of basses too. When I first started using the bass bone, I was using my old modulus basses and my Spectres. For different basses for different songs. I like being able to level things out with the bass bone. And I've just, even though I don't need it as much as I used to, I've kind of stuck with it because it is a good, clean signal. So right from that bass bone, we send a clean signal to the mixing board. So there's our first channel. Then from there, we go into a Seymour Duncan studio bass pedal, which is a compressor. Tighten things up a little bit, and then we go into a dark glass microtubes Ultra, B7K Ultra. And before I've used B7, the regular B7K or a B3K. They all have a very similar kind of gain circuit. It might even be the same kind. I'd have to ask Doug to clarify, but they all sound great, and I've really become a big fan of having a clean channel to mix with the dirty channel. So we take the line out from the B7K Ultra, and that's the second channel that goes to the board. And that's what you're hearing through the PA when you hear my sound live. Through the PA, you're hearing a clean channel from a radial bass bone and a dirty channel from a dark glass overdrive pedal. In my current configuration, it's the B7K Ultra. And those 2 are blended. And that's just worked really well, because certain nights you need a little more of one or the other, and our sound man John can figure that out based on the room. Tonight we need a little more dirt, so we have it. It's not just one channel and just deal with it. He can kind of make his own mix of the 2. channels night by night. So anyway, from there we go up into my Aguilar head, and I usually use in Europe I rent a DB 750, and in the States I'll use my DB 751 or Tone Hammer 500. I also fly with the Tone Hammer 500. That you'll hear that it goes into either whatever, when I'm doing fly gigs, whatever cabinet they give me is what I use. I try to get an Aguilar cabinet, but usually it's it most often winds up being an Ampeg that they're able to rent for me. But in Europe and the States, I'm pretty much always using an Aguilar cabinet. And so the people that are really hearing the Aguilar sound are the ones that are right in front of me. The fans that are like kind of front and center. So the people they're usually the ones. The people that are in front of me are more often than not the people that are interested in how I play. So they're getting even that little bit more bonus tone. They get to hear how the Aguilar amp affects my tone, whereas through the PA it's just those two channels I mentioned before. And then from the Aguilar amp, I also take a line out to the monitor board, and that goes into my in-ear system. I use Ultimate Ears, and I have a Sennheiser wireless system. And the in-ears, I bought that system to use with Conquering Dystopia, the sideband I'm in with Jeff Loomis, Keith Merrow, and Alex Rudinger. Mm-hmm. And that, they all use in-ears. So when we did the tour back in 2014, I bought the system, and I thought, well, I just dropped almost $2,000 on this whole system here. Maybe I should try it out with Cannibal. Paul had already switched to in-ears a while ago because when he used to use a wedge, he had so much guitar in it that it would start to go in to
the drum mics.
Into other mics.
Yeah, exactly.
So once he switched to in-ears, things got a little better for us on stage, and then our soundman Pete had kind of wondered if I'd be interested in in-ears too, and I was pretty stubborn about not doing it. But once I'd sunk the money in, we didn't have a backline in Conquering, so I was not going to be the only guy up there with an amp. Mm-hmm. We were all using direct signals for that tour, so I kind of had to buy it, and it wound up working out so good with Cannibal that's what I've used since 2014 as an in-ear system. It's great. I don't have to crank up to hear myself anymore. I have bass in my ears plus the kick and the snare. A little bit of the other drums bleed in there, and then I hear everything else ambiently. It still gets through. You know what I mean? Like the guitars are still. Those guys are not on in-ears, and neither is George. So I hear their monitors, so I hear the vocals and the guitars just ambiently. But in my ears, I have the bass as loud as I want it, and it's the Aguilar line out, so I can control it throughout the show. If it needs a little more mid-range or whatever, or a little more gain, I can do that without it affecting the PA signal, which makes our sound man happy. That I can,
absolutely.
I can sit there and mess around with what's in my ears without interfering with his job.
Yeah, and there's, if you're not monitoring on stage as loud with your amp, less stage rumble, more clarity out front. Yeah, the sound man can just, he can get you that aggressive, tight, clean sound out front without it getting messy.
Yeah, no, there were times where, Pete would kind of let me know, before we had John, he was like, hey man, you are so loud up there that I had to practically take you out of the PA tonight.
Good Lord.
And I was like, well, it doesn't seem that loud to me. And he was like, well, because bass waves, some of them, they don't even get to full volume for like 30 feet or whatever, so I could crank it up so loud and still not hear it all that well on stage. But then it's super loud out by him, plus it might be out of phase with the PA signal that he's trying to send.
Exactly.
So there's that too. So really by having I still have stage volume, but it's a much more modest level. It works much better with the overall mix. And then I'm cranked in my ears. I hear every note I play, every little detail. So you play more tightly with in-ears, in my opinion. Like you didn't realize how much slop you were letting by until you hear your tone soloed up. Right. And then if you can play something that sounds 95% tight, when you hear it soloed up, it sounds 100% tight in the mix.
Yeah.
Especially for bass, So it's really tightened up my playing using the in-ears.
So we got all the way to the amp there. That's the signal chain.
Yes.